You're listening to the Full Circle Music Show, the why of the music biz. Well, here we are once again at the Full Circle Music Show. I'm Chris Murphy, sitting beside Mr. Seth Mosley. How are you, sir?
I am good, and I'm so excited to be here today.
Man, I'm impressed every time we do a show because we have such amazing conversations, and not just because they're amazing conversations, because you can have that with just about anybody, but the amount of talent, the amount of hardware on these people's walls, just giving you proof of their music industry cred. It's huge. Today we've got Neal Avron on the show. You'll know Neal from his mixing and producing of everybody from Sara, Bareilles, Linkin Park, Switchfoot, and then it goes on and on. Wallflowers. I mean, good grief, the guy's done everybody.
You've probably heard one of his latest works, Everywhere, which is a song called Shut Up and Dance by a band called Walk the Moon. The thing has been on movies, TV shows, top 10s, top one, number ones, everything. But this guy talks to us today about the craft that goes into our work, and he's really someone that we should all kind of aspire to because he's a perfectionist. He's been at it and is always constantly learning. I think one of the big parts of what we try to talk about on this show is education, and Neal is a big fan. I can tell just by talking to him today that you should never stop learning and never stop improving.
It's pretty incredible to think that with the amount of credits that Neal has, he could very easily rest on his laurels, but he hasn't, and he continues to put out hits and put out records that are critically acclaimed as well as loved by the public.
And to reinvent himself continually, not be afraid of that.
True.
You listen to Wallflowers and then you listen to Walk the Moon. Those are two pretty different things, but the fact is that he's not afraid to keep reinventing himself and keep refining his craft.
Let's get right into it.
We've got special guest Neal Avron with us via Skype all the way from Hollywood, Los Angeles, California. Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
Neal, I've gotten the chance to work with you a few times, and I know that even in the time since, you've done some just incredible work in your career that I've been a big fan of, but even since I've known you, it seems like your work just keeps getting more and more awesome by the second. I mean, you had a big hit recently with the band called Walk the Moon that literally, if you turn on the radio or if you turn on TV, you cannot help but hearing that song. Shut Up and Dance is the name of the song, right?
Correct.
And can you, maybe elaborate on, I guess, that story, but even more so, just back up with, just for the people out there, how did you get to where you are, and what's the path that leads up to you mixing a song like that and just taking over the world?
Well, this could take the whole hour, but
we got time.
Well, I don't know how most people take their path, but for me, it's just really been the slow, gradual climb. And now in retrospect, seeing other people kind of go into the music business, both, now and people that have been in it for a long time, I think I wouldn't have done it any other way. And, for me, it started out, I went to music school, got a music degree. I was a trumpet player, played some keyboards. And after graduating music school, I worked at a couple big recording studios. I started out actually as a tech fixing the gear, and that was kind of more of a means to an end, because when I was at school, when I was at University of Miami, a couple people who had graduated before, a couple years before us, would come back and talk to us about what it was like on the real, outside in the real world. And I remember one person in particular who I thought was a really great engineer when we were in school, came back, and he must have lost 30 pounds. He looked like hell. And he was telling us, how hard it was. He was in New York. He was a runner, making no money, sleeping on couches. And I just started going, whoa, I don't know if this is exactly what I was expecting. And but he said that, the techs that worked at the studio had more normal hours. They made more money. And if you could do that, that would be a much better way to get your foot in the door. So lucky for me, I was also getting a minor in electrical engineering and had a real natural ability to kind of fix gear. So I decided to apply for jobs at these studios as techs and found that it was pretty easy to get a job that way. And I started at a studio in Miami as a tech. And then I assisted a little bit, and then I found out about a job here in Los Angeles, and I moved here and started again as a tech for about a year. And then when one of the assistants finally moved on to becoming an independent engineer, I told the studio that I wanted to move into assisting. So I never really had to kind of go through the runner route. I went right from teching into assisting. And then from assisting, I assisted for about 3.5 years on amazing sessions.
Wow.
Just got to watch the best of the best engineers and producers and how they worked, and really just was a sponge. I was working 100+ hour weeks, and I could just never get enough of it. As I find that most of us that work in studios, kind of that's it. Like if you really are truly in love with this thing, you just can't get enough of it. You just love doing it.
You were mentioning a minute ago that you say that you would spend over 100 hours a week working in it, and it didn't get old for you. That sounds like a lot of time to dedicate to one thing, but I guess if I'm hearing you correctly, if it's your dream, that's what you're pursuing, then there's nothing to get tired of because you're in the thick of what you want to be doing anyway. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I think almost, yes, it is your dream, but I think more so it almost isn't work. It's just something you enjoy so much that it doesn't feel like work. So when you're there for 12+ hours a day, you're never thinking about it as work. You're thinking about it as music. You're thinking about it as, bonding with these musicians and getting these performances on tape and going from literally back then, literally an empty tape reel to the magic of a finished song. It's hard to come up with something that's that equal. It's like, if you're a painter, when you start with a blank canvas and you finish something, there's just a feeling it's hard to express for somebody who has that in them. And for me, it was just so profound that I loved doing it so much and it's like Vegas. There's no windows in these studios, so you don't know what time it is. So when you're there for 16 hours a day, all of a sudden you're exhausted and you fall asleep. Just as you're about to fall asleep, you're like, oh, I was just in the studio for 16 hours and I got to get up in 5 and do it again. So yeah, I never really thought of it as like a job, I guess. It just seemed like a passion and I loved it. So it didn't matter about the hours.
That's incredible. Is that always been the way that you have interacted with music? Has it always been that close to you?
I think so. I mean, ever since I can remember in elementary school starting on the recorder and the auto harp and stuff like that. I remember just loving it and taking piano lessons when I was a kid. And although I had a few piano teachers that I didn't love, I remember having these feelings about music and always being drawn to it and having my 45 collection and just always being drawn to music. Yeah.
If you were doing anything else, what do you think you'd be doing if you weren't the Neal Avron that we know today?
I probably had that discussion with myself a million times, and I can't imagine anything. I mean, I guess to be honest with you, I started college as an electrical engineer. I thought I wasn't going to go the music path, and after a semester of that, I was getting really great grades and everything, but I just decided I couldn't see myself, in a suit designing electronic circuits for, some air conditioning company or something and getting my little pay raises and whatever. And I probably would have been happy, but I don't think I would have been deeply satisfied. And I just made that decision that I'd rather earn less money and be happy in my life than do that. And so I just made that conscious decision to be happy in my life and do what my passion was, and then let the chips fall where they may.
Well, with you going into engineering, was that something that you did because you thought that's what you needed to do, that was the appropriate thing to do, was to get a kind of a, I don't know, for lack of a better term, safe, secure job, that this music thing, although a passion of yours, wasn't something that could really make a living or be called a career?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think anybody in my family thought the music business was a good business to go in. And let's face it, for all of us that have had any success in the music business, there are probably 20, 50 people that haven't. And so it's like most businesses there. It's very difficult to kind of rise up and be in a situation where you're making a good living and working on good projects.
Do you think that your family, your parents would still have that relation to the music industry now that they've seen your success?
Let's put it this way. I think despite my success, if they were having another child today, they would probably say, "No, don't do that. Be a doctor, be a lawyer, be a something that they think is stable." But that's also kind of a more old-fashioned looking way to look at things.
Absolutely. You know what? I think that there is a sense there that, maybe for parents, I want my child to have the best chance at success. And the streets of Hollywood are littered with all those that have come to try to do it, or the music business, or whatever you're going into. So I don't take that as bad advice from parents, but when the passion is there and you've got the skill set as well, like you obviously do, that is a different set of circumstances altogether.
Yeah, I mean, I think it overrides everything. I tell my kids, based on my experience, to do what they're passionate about, do what they love, do something that when you're doing it, it doesn't feel like a job. It feels like something you want to do. Because if you do that and you're good at it and you have a passion for it, the money part of it will come eventually. You know what I mean? You'll find your way, you'll find your niche, and the money. Don't worry about the money; that will come. But if you hate your job, even though you're making decent money, I don't think you're going to necessarily be happy in life.
Sure. Well, and I think that you kind of spoke on it earlier as well. The fact that you set yourself up for success, because you definitely did. You put in the time, you put in the hours, you put in the education. And so it wasn't an overnight thing, but it was something that the success is a whole lot easier to attain when you're not just walking into it for the first time and expecting to knock it out of the park.
100% agreed. I definitely took the long-range goal approach for myself, and for me, it's really worked out. And to be honest with you, I still don't feel like I've attained, all the goals that I want. So I feel like I'm still clawing and fighting and learning and working towards those goals.
What do you think was could you pinpoint one specific time or a time in your life where you thought this is it? Like, because I know that so much of life and then trying to make it into a career is, you're trudging along, you're putting in those 100-hour a week, that time. What was the first thing that you said, okay, this is it. I made the right decision. I'm going down the right path here.
I mean, I would say that's probably when I was involved in my first big hit. Then I thought, okay, this is the right way. I mean, I guess really even before that, the first minute I walk into a studio and I'm working with people that just 3-4 years ago I was looking at the back of records and going, oh my God, these are the best musicians, or this is the best studio. I would love to work there. And then all of a sudden I'm in the room with them and I'm doing the punch-ins, and that to me, those were my idols, those studio musicians or those studios. So getting a chance to be in there and one of them, that was an amazing experience for me.
And was there a song that you felt like, okay, so your first big hit I'm guessing was that an Everclear song, or what would you say was that one song where you felt like, okay, this is it, like I've not made it, but I'm doing what I want to do, and I feel like I have some degree of expertise and critical reception.
Well, the first big hit I was involved with was the Wallflowers record that had One Headlight on it and 6th Avenue Heartache, and that record ended up selling 5 million records. When we were working on that record, I didn't know that it would be that kind of a big record. I liked the songs, and I thought Jacob's voice was amazing, and I learned a lot working with T-Bone, who I worked with on several projects. And when that became big, it kind of became for me, it became like a snowball of opportunities. And that's actually how I got involved with Everclear. Is Art from Everclear loved that Wallflowers record, and he found me out. And so I got involved with them, and I started as just an engineer for the Everclear record, and he ended up making me co-producer uh, because he felt like I was adding a lot to the record on a production side. So, and then the Newfound Glory guys really loved the Everclear records, and so you can see it just started to snowball. And the Boy guys loved the Newfound Glory records, and so essentially a career was born.
Sure. And that's pretty amazing. Even to go back to the Wallflowers record, I mean, to hear a song like One Headlight coming through your speakers as you're tracking it, that's enlightening for me to even hear that. Yeah, we didn't really know it was going to be a hit. I mean, isn't that so true that whenever you go into work every day, I mean, how many days do you feel like, oh yeah, this is going to be a hit? Like, most of us are just guessing all the time. I feel like, anyways, even experts, and for you to say that, like, nobody can really ever know. So doesn't that speak to just the discipline of just showing up every day?
100%. I mean, it's hard to tell. You go in with the intent. You may feel a song is strong. You may feel a sound you've developed is strong. But it's really, at the end of the day, I mean, look, there was definitely a visceral feeling when you listen to those songs that things felt really good. And at that point, they felt very organic and real. But no, I mean, could you imagine it selling 5 million records? Definitely not. And that was back in the day also when MTV was still quite big and really could help things out. And the One Headlight video just really, I think, echoed the song, and it just had a great look and feel to it. And so I think the whole thing kind of pushed it into a new strata.
Sure. And I mean, to kind of piggyback on all that, would you say that, I mean, if you had kind of one piece of advice going back to the younger you, knowing what you know now at the, you're obviously pretty established in your career, but if you were to look back on yourself on the very front end when you were doing those long hour late night things in the studio, what would you tell yourself then if you had one piece of advice? Or three, or four.
Yeah. There's that book or saying where, put in your 10,000 hours. That's what it takes.
Sure.
And I guess I'd probably, on those long nights or those nights or there's days when my wife had something with her work and I would miss that because I was working every Sunday, or, I was at the whim of at that point, the producer's schedule. So if they wanted to work on a Sunday, or if they wanted to work on a holiday, or they wanted to work, if they said, hey, we're not going to work this upcoming weekend. So I would make plans, and then they go, oh, you know what? We decided we are going to work this weekend. And so now I had to scuttle my plans. I would tell myself that, look, it's ultimately going to be worth it. It's going to be a lot of sacrifice. And we all make sacrifices, not just in the music industry, but that it was all going to pay off. Things were going to work out, and the hard work would pay off. I think I would just tell myself to stay the course and be persistent.
Sure. I think that's good, man.
Yeah, gosh, it seems like, again, one of the things that Seth and I talk about on this show is it seems like there's a growing trend when you talk to consummate professionals that have been in the game and have seen the ups and the downs, and regardless of what the industry is doing, it's just about putting on your pants every morning and going to work and doing it, and that is in and of itself a reward. But that is how when something pays off, when when you hit that 5 million album mark, those kinds of things, it's like, well, it's because I continued to put in the work on the front end. Have you ever gotten to a point where you thought, with some of those things, whether it's dealing with the producer's schedule or trying to find your balance when it comes to family and work, to where, has it ever become a point to where it didn't seem worth it, or if you decided to possibly make a change, or has that sacrifice always been part of the gig and totally worth it?
Look, I mean, I've been married for a while, so that's the toughest part, is having kids, having a wife, and trying to be in a situation where there's so many demands, especially when you're producing and the artists are around, and you're needed for every part of it, and they are very anxious and are ready to roll and be in the studio for those 12 hours a day. And you got your kid's soccer game, or you need to take your wife to an important event or a dinner, or just spend any quality time with them. That makes the juggling act very difficult at times, and I think that's been the hardest thing.
Sure.
But no, I don't think I've ever thought this isn't worth it, or I want to hang it up and get a 9-to-5 job because this is just too much of a strain. I mean, I often wonder what it would be like, but I don't. I don't even know if there are 9-to-5 jobs anymore, but I often wonder what it would be like to have that kind of job where you walk in, you do your work, at 5 o'clock you have zero responsibilities until you walk into work the next day. I often wonder what that life would be like. But for me, it probably wouldn't be very satisfying. I need to be stimulated, and I need to be challenged, and I need to be artistically, engaged.
Sure.
Well, it's that whole saying of, a bad day at doing what you love is way better than a good day at doing what you don't love. So that's the way I always think of it anyway. And obviously, yeah, you do got to have the whole work-life balance thing dialed as much as you can. But I'm always thankful every day to wake up and get paid anything for doing what I love to do. So
Sure.
It sounds like you would probably, echo that.
100%. I would. That's exact. When I entered the business, I knew it. If I don't make it, in any kind of big way or whatever it would be, you could consider that. As long as I could, make a decent living, I'd rather be doing this than making a much better living doing something I disliked.
Sure. There are enough stories out there of people that are barely making ends meet and hating what they do, that I'm glad that there are the dreamers out there that are continuing to pursue their passions in a career that they love and they have passion for. And then like what you were saying earlier, if you continue to do that, the money will follow.
That's the way I think about it.
Shifting gears a little bit, have you ever been put in a situation where you're like, oh, this is my dream scenario, and then got into it and it wasn't exactly what you thought it was going to be, or you took something and you thought, well, this is going to be okay, and it turned out to be quite an amazing, transformative experience for you? And I'm not looking for you to necessarily spill any names, although you can if you'd like, but just for the experiential part of trying to go into something with expectations of them either not being met or completely blowing you out of the water.
That's a good question. I don't know that I've walked into any project and thought this is not going to go very well, and it's come out well. I would say this is, to me, this is more of, or I should say, it's less of a project by project or artist by artist basis, but more of a day by day thing for me. When I walk into working, I always walk in with like the best of, okay, this is going to be a great day. I'm going to really, work hard and make something sound good, or have a great production or whatever. But it tends to be a real roller coaster ride for me emotionally every day. It starts out like, wow, this isn't sounding good. I'm not doing a really good job here, or I'm not. And then, oh, wow, this is a thing that triggers it. Now, oh, I kind of like this. Now I think I found my way. And it's kind of every day, it's this kind of mountain climb for me. And I kind of love that. I love walking out of here either really satisfied that I did a great job, or, some days I walk out of here and go, you know what, I just haven't nailed it. I just need to get out of here. I need to come back tomorrow with a fresh perspective. and then I usually can climb that mountain again. And for me, that's more of the mental game. I've been really fortunate to work with a lot of great artists. I haven't had a lot of run-ins with people, and I think probably part of that is, as I meet artists before we get working together in some kind of where we're kind of deciding if we want to work together. I think I'm adept at kind of finding people that I can relate to and I feel are going to be a good working partner for me, and I try to avoid the people that I think are going to be a big issue, and I can tell that there's going to be problems ahead. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Well, that speaks. I mean, we talk all the time at on this show and at Full Circle Music that the team is really it, and that team includes the artists that you're working with. It includes the labels that you're working with. Includes your own staff at the studios and everything. But the team really is it. I mean, you can be a one-man show, but that only has so much of a shelf life. And I think that's the guys that make it last in music business. Would you say that they're just experts at surrounding themselves with just incredible teams?
I totally agree. I mean, two people that I worked with T-Bone Burnett, as I mentioned before, and I've worked with Rick Rubin as well. And I think those guys are very talented on many levels, but I think one of the things I really learned from those two guys is putting the right people together in the studio for that specific project. And, for me, that would mean, okay, this is the type of artist they are, so they should really be in this kind of space, whether it be a commercial facility or a home studio, or, these guys really need a really big, bombastic cement, large place with glitzy lounge, or these guys need a real intimate, homey feel that's wood and dim lights, or you know what I mean? They really understand that. And then so the vibe is kind of set up. And then if it's an artist that's not a band, then they put the band together and they have the right musicians, and they've really worked hard to get the right kind of people involved, and they know whether they should be tracking everything live or if it should be, you know what I mean? There's just a real synergy, and they get the engineer that can put it together because, and again, if it's for a live thing, they've got a guy who's really great with putting the live sound together and getting the drum sound and getting the vibe right for the room. So I think that's one of their specialties, is knowing how to shape the session, when to put the foot on the gas and really put the pressure on the artist to come up with something, when to back off and give them some space. And I think that's just a real feel thing. And some people have that naturally. Some people develop it over time. But I think that's a really important part of being a producer, and just I've learned those kinds of things from people like that.
You know what? That's incredible, and I don't think that we've heard that too much talking about environment here on the show from some of the other guests that we've had. Not that they don't think it as well, but I really appreciate how you can articulate that. And for some of those people maybe out there that are listening, that the synergy and the thinking through of creating an environment and a group of people to kind of go to battle with for this particular point of time. For some of those out there that are listening, that this doesn't come as naturally as maybe it does to you, or maybe it wasn't as natural for you, but you have kind of honed your process or being empathetic to the moment. What would you say that someone could do to kind of start to develop that sense that they can continue to let that grow as they develop in their career?
That's a really good question. As you were asking it, I started to think already of my answer, and the first thing that came into my mind was me reading the credits on albums when I was a kid, and seeing who the musicians were. Knowing that Russ Kunkel was playing drums on Fire and Rain on James Taylor records, and and knowing that Danny Korchmar was playing with Don Henley on Boys of Summer, and you know what I mean? And so you start to have these names of these people and you associate them with these projects. And so you start to wonder why those people were chosen to play on those records. Or you see an album where there's, this guy played drums on these 3 songs, this guy played drums. You think of like Peter Gabriel's So record, and like Stuart Copeland played hi-hat on a song. You know what I mean? And you just go, okay, why did he play hi-hat only on Red Rain? And, part of that is that one of the things that makes Stuart Copeland so magical is what he does with his hi-hat. So the producer decided, I'm going to hire the absolute best hi-hat player ever to play hi-hat on this song. You know what I mean? It was
That's incredible.
So to me, I think that's how it formulates in my mind is, who's really going to fit the song for that moment, for that part. I mean, that's a very esoteric kind of one-off little reference.
Sure.
But, if you listen to Manu Katché and playing on a Robbie Robertson record or something like that, or even the Peter Gabriel records, and you see what he brings to those grooves, and you just go, wow, that is just the best choice you could possibly imagine. And to me, that's a producer being on his A game.
That it brings me to think of something that, and this is in no way a judgment on the current state of how music is distributed and everything, but I also remember growing up, and I had a really intimate relationship with liner notes. Every time I would get an album, I would just pour through them and memorize the people and memorize what they were doing and why they were there in a similar manner to what you're speaking of. It's sad to me to think that there may be a generation of musicians that are growing up just buying a track off of iTunes and not having a clue who's actually on that tune, because it was such an important part of my musical development, and it sounds like you as well.
100%. It is a real shame that there's no good, as CDs are kind of going the way of the dodo. There's really no way for people to be informed of who produced it, where it was made, maybe what studio it was made in, what musicians were used, those kinds of things. And to me, that's inspirational. It's really important. I mean, if you ever look at credits on my records, I always write things like, mastered at Sterling Sound, New York. I want people to know, where, or, made in this studio in Hollywood, California. I want them to know. So if they ever get a chance to be in that room, in that town, there's a real feeling like, oh, this is the room. I can see why, that song has that sound because the room has that sound. You know what I mean? And to me, I love that connection.
Well, and I mean, along with that kind of brings me to an interesting question of, with nowadays, you having been in the business since Wallflowers won Headlight. I mean, a lot has changed since then with not only record budgets, but just the fact of how records are even made nowadays. Can you speak a little bit to that? I mean, do you feel like that's and is having a negative impact on the record making process, or are people just having to be more resourceful? I mean, nowadays, I even think, okay, most records that we're making are in my studio in Franklin, Tennessee, and so obviously we're not usually getting the choice of, let's go to this room and that room and this room and that room just for kind of convenience sake. But have you seen that as a negative thing with record budgets kind of decreasing and how the process is carried out nowadays?
I think a lot of thoughts with regards to this. Yes, I think it's negative. Let's start with the first thing. I think the fact that people aren't getting paid for their creative output is a real shame. That's the first thing, and that's just trickling down to all of us. But without getting on the high horse of that part of it, I think I think a lot of people in the music industry are missing out on that ability to bond together in a space that is unique for that record with a unique group of musicians. That's not to say you can't make, a lot of records out of the same room and every time you have to do a different thing. I'm just saying, I think there's so many studios that have gone out of business, so many people that worked at those studios, so many people that support them, people who rent drums, who rent guitars, who musicians. How many string players have been out of a job because we can all just synthesize these samples that we buy for a couple $100s. I mean, you could go on and on and on, and it's not like, it's not unlike the automotive industry where they have robotic things putting together cars now, so people are out of jobs. It's not necessarily super different, but it in my mind, as somebody who grew up with all those people and that whole back part of the music industry, and seeing all those jobs go away, it's kind of a sad thing, to not go to these commercial facilities nearly as much, and a lot of people don't do it at all.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I feel that's a shame. And so there's a big trickle down. I mean, we're getting down to only a couple real record companies. Yeah, there's a bunch of indies, but there's only really a handful of majors anymore. And it seems like eventually we're going to be down to one record company called like Big Brother Records, and they just do. You know what I mean? That's where it feels like there's only a handful of A&R people, and so yeah, I think it's really a little bit of a shame. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, I do think that there is a lot of innovative music being made, and a lot of that I think has to do with anytime there's new gear, somebody pushes it to the limit. We got autotune, everybody hated autotune. Then Cher did that thing with the crazy autotune, it became this thing.
Right.
So, okay, that became like its own instrument in a way. And with all the soft synths, they become their own little thing. But stuff starts to get a little homogenous, and so people have to push the envelope in different ways. So I think there are good things that come out of it. I think we have a kind of a wider range of musical styles than we've ever had, which I think is great. I think artists that don't have a chance to be on a major now have a chance to get their music out there, and I think that's great. So I think there's pluses and minuses. But to me, the big backstory ultimately is that I'd love to see artists get compensated for their art, and I'd like people not to think that 99 cents is way too much to pay for a song, and all music should be free. And I just think that's a very slippery slope when you go there.
Yeah. Of course, I would echo that as well. Do you have any idea, if you were suddenly put in charge of all music industry protocol, that there's something you could step in and do immediately or over time that would help to kind of bridge that gap from where we were to where we are now, so that it's not so commoditized?
I think the biggest thing that I always think of is education. And to me, that starts with, first graders and second graders and third graders who are already on the internet, teaching them that the internet is not free. Things that, you think are free aren't really free. Somebody make the connection in their brains at a very early age that if there is some content or some thing on the internet, it's not really free, and explain to them how somebody had to create it, that it took them time to make that, and that time is worth something, and it's valuable. And you can equate it to, I always equate it to some guy who pays for a load of lumber, has it delivered to his house so he can build a house, or a lot to build a house. And then some people walking by and go, oh, you know what? There's a few 2x4s. I could use some of those, and just grabbing them. Nobody would really do that. I mean, not somebody of the right mind and a good conscience would do that. And so to just go, oh, there's a song, I can see a button that I can press and I can instantly have it for free. It's, because you're anonymous and you're behind this cloak, you can just go ahead and do that. And I think if you educate people and you spend 10, 12, 14 years teaching them about this thing, then I think in a generation you will have a more educated, teenager or young adult who will go, oh, you know what? I have a conscience. I'm not going to download that for free because I know that, you know what I mean? I wouldn't want somebody downloading my work for free or my software that I developed or whatever, my intellectual property. And I think they'd have a healthier respect for that. And I think that's really the long-term thing that I would do.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Neal, as we're wrapping up today, we're really thankful for your time and your generosity for joining us today. If you were to leave our listeners with any thought today, what might that be?
No pressure.
You know, if music is the thing that you're passionate about and you love, then, you know, go for it. If it's not, then it's going to be too hard. You know, it requires too much of your life. And if you don't have that drive and that passion, then that's okay. Find that thing that is. But if it is that drive, if it is that passion that you wake up wanting to do and that you can't get enough of, then, you know, find a way to get your foot in the door, start, you know, learning your craft, and know that it's okay that it takes time to work up to, you know, whatever level it is that you think you want to attain, but it can be done if you've got if you've got some skills and you've got that passion, then go for it.
Awesome, man.
That was well said. I wish that I had listened and paid attention to that type of advice years ago. I felt like for myself that there was so much in the world that, like, oh man, I would love to be doing that, but it seems like it would take so much work, so I'm not going to start that today. And then to continue to have that passion, but to never have started, it eventually kind of fades away. And so to hear you say that, and to hear that with all the success that you've had, really means a lot, because it's not an overnight process, but with hard work and something that you love, you can really make a difference and live your dream. And you don't have to get that 9-to-5 job that would be something that could kill your soul, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Neal, this has been a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. It was great talking to both of you.
Yeah, man. Have a blast, man. I'm sure you're going right back to work, so we'll let you get to it and mix the next Walk the Moon smash.
All right, you guys. Well, hopefully it's something we work on together.
Yeah.
Hey, there you go.
Looking forward to it.
All right, man.
Neal,
Great
I'll be in touch, man. I sure do appreciate it.
Of course. And Seth, congrats on all your success too, dude. You're killing it.
Man, well, right back at you. Thank you.
All right, man. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Hey, we hope you've enjoyed this episode and will join us again soon on the Full Circle Music Show, the why of the music biz.
Check us out at fullcirclemusic.org/podcast.